Hi everybody, this is Melissa Chambliss with Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. Here with me today is Rob Richardson, who's actually running for mayor for Cincinnati. We're going to give it a few minutes before we get started because we have several other groups that are going to be joining. So I think TWW East Side, we also have an Indivisible group that is going to join and several others. So we're just going to give it a minute and then we'll get started, okay? So just as a quick update on how this is going to work, what's going to happen is I'll kind of give a brief introduction to Rob here. His bio is on our website. His bio is also on our public page, so anybody has access to that. You can also go to robforcincinnati.com and you can see all of his information on there. So I'll just give a brief kind of introduction. And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of engage in some questions. Just so you know, Rob, a few days ago, actually last week, we actually posted, if you had a chance to ask, a mayor candidate who's running for mayor in Cincinnati, what question would you have for them? So we actually compiled together quite a list of good questions. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see how you're going to answer those. We'll go through those questions, but of course we'll always take questions and we'll stop what we're doing mid-session even to ask and answer any of your Facebook Live questions because we really want to engage the audience in this. I'm just waiting for a signal from the crew here of when we've got the other groups up and running, and then we can get started. All right, great.
A long time. I forgot we scheduled this like months ago.
Well, you and I, and well, your campaign manager and I have actually been interacting for quite some time to get the date scheduled and everything else. Obviously, you have a lot of engagements.
Well, I'm glad we can do it.
Running for mayor.
Yeah, we're glad to do it. Very important group, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone just joining, I am Melissa Chambliss. I'm with Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. And here today with me is Rob Richardson, who is running for mayor in Cincinnati. As you know, I think the primary vote is May 2nd,
it is
right?
Days.
Yeah, it's getting close. So make sure that the time from a registration standpoint is already passed. That was actually in April. But if you are registered in Cincinnati, please make sure that you go out and vote, whether it's for Rob, Yvette, whoever that you're going to vote for, because every vote counts. But today we're going to be talking with Rob Richardson, and hopefully we'll get the go-ahead from the crew here in just a minute. We're waiting for several groups that are going to be broadcasting this live because we want to maximize participation and, of course, maximize your time. We definitely appreciate it. And I think we're good. We're good to go. Maybe. I'm getting like a little bit of a frowny face and kind of. So we're going to give it just one more minute and I'll walk through how this works again and then we'll go. Okay? So for those of you who are just joining, Melissa Chambliss with Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. We're broadcasting Facebook Live with Rob Richardson, who is running for mayor. How this is going to work is I'll do a brief intro, and then we'll just kind of launch into, we'll let you do a couple of minutes talking about whatever, your platform and what is it that made you motivated to run for mayor, and then we'll get started into the questions. We have questions compiled from the group ahead of time. We've asked them last week, what would you ask who's running for mayor? So we got quite a few of those, but typically we get quite a few live questions also, so we'll stop what we're doing and ask those questions. And get those running. So let me check with the group here. Everybody's up. Everybody's up and running. Technology. Okay. So, again, since we're just starting, Melissa Chambliss, Rob Richardson. I know you feel like I've done this like 12 times, don't you? So he's running for mayor, Rob Richardson. You can go to robforcincinnati.com and you can see his full bio and all of his information. Lots of great information there. I'll give you some highlights and then we'll kind of turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll start asking some questions. So Rob attended elementary and middle school, and he was enrolled in kind of learning disability classes. And from what I understand from your background and your bio, you were told that you probably would never be able to attend college. And it was really through, from what I've heard of your story, it's really through your mom and her motivational words to you that really inspired you to work hard and to work diligently. And you enrolled as a student at UC, where you actually established the first collegiate chapter of the NAAC and the NAACP in the tri-state area. And at UC, you were actually the student body president. So already running for some kind of office, right?
I guess so. In my DNA, I don't know.
Yeah, and you received your engineering degree. So Rob also attended UC for law school. And in 2007, Governor Ted Strickland asked Rob to serve on UC's Board of Trustees, and he became board chair in 2016. Rob established the UC Scholars Academy, a leadership development and academic preparedness program for students in the Cincinnati Public School District. Rob also advocates systematic top-down reforms to UC policy, police policy, following the killing of Sam DuBois. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing about that statement, by the way. I'm laughing because we have background noise. Currently, Rob is a marketing construction representative while also serving of counsel with a law firm. So that's quite a bit of accomplishments. And that was the brief version of the introduction.
That's good. I don't know if I can get better than that. From here.
Well, we'll turn it over to you and just let you kind of talk just for a few minutes about what you'd like to talk about, and then we'll kick it off with questions, okay?
Sure. Well, thank you. And I want to thank the whole audience and everyone who's listening here today. The reason why I have a passion for public service and I want to get involved, I'm getting involved right now in our city at this leadership level because like many of you, I'm frustrated with what's going on in Cincinnati, what's also going on in our country. But it's not enough for us to oppose. We have to really propose a vision and put it forward. And what makes me uniquely qualified at this time to lead our city is that I want to focus on not what's next politically, but what's best long-term for the city of Cincinnati. And my progressive, innovative, I think, agenda that I want to put forward is to make Cincinnati one of the most inclusive and innovative cities, not in Ohio, not in the Midwest, but the world. And we have the access and resources to actually do that. What we need is leadership that's actually focused on doing it, and that's not just looking toward for short-term results. Three areas that I want to focus on when we talk about systemic reform and really moving people out of poverty and into opportunities, because that's what I see as a progressive city, one that does that offers opportunities for those at the top, but also offers opportunities for those at all levels, because change happens not from the outside in, but the inside out. Three areas that we're going to focus on: expanding access to educational opportunities. Second, making sure we have a 21st century transportation infrastructure. You can't be a city of the 21st century with the 20th century infrastructure. And not only do we have a 20th century infrastructure, it's from the 1950s. So we're way behind. And in my first term, I'm going to make sure we have a comprehensive transportation that gets everybody to the jobs that they need. There are currently 75,000 jobs that are inaccessible to people in the city of Cincinnati. Third, we're going to make sure we have inclusionary growth. And I believe in inclusionary zoning. And as we grow as a city, people should not be excluded from the areas of growth through pure gentrification, but allowed to participate in that economy. And you do that by having inclusionary zoning. So as developers do development, they have to do affordable housing that's actually integrated. And you shouldn't be able to tell the affordable housing unit from the market rate unit. That's the Cincinnati I see. One Cincinnati where access and opportunities are granted for all who are willing to work for it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate that. I think that was, a good overview of some of the things that I've heard from you in other Facebook Live and then other events that I've seen you do regarding how you feel and what you're standing for. So we're going to just kind of jump into questions. And as a reminder for everybody who's watching this live, if you want to ask a question, you just make sure that you actually click on the video itself and post the question in the feed of the video so that we'll see that. And those will kind of pop up here and we'll stop at a natural pausing point and ask any questions that you have, okay? So as I said beforehand, we kind of posted a couple of weeks ago and really got a lot of questions, great questions, I think, from our participants on our page, Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. And so one of the things is, just really from your perspective, we're going to let the bus pass. So from your perspective, how do you feel the job of being the mayor has changed in the past decade?
Well, that's a great question. One, in the current state of what's going on in our city and our country, it's more vital than ever to have a mayor that is progressive and has courage to fight. We're in an environment that's very, very tough for progressives and really people that believe in equity and equality from my point of view. So the local level is where you can have the most impact. We're not going to get much help from the state right now. We're not going to get much help from the federal government. Where we're really going to have progressive impact and policies is really on the local level. And I firmly believe that having success on this level will translate to broader levels. So being a mayor is much more important than it used to be. Most people are moving into cities, and as the current trajectory is that more and more people will live in cities. So cities are really going to determine policy and determine how we move forward as a society. So becoming a mayor is much more, I think, hands-on than it used to be. It requires a lot more work. It's not enough just to sit in City Hall and just, pass motions and come around every few years. You need a mayor that's going to be not only accessible but willing to organize and bring people together. One thing I want to really emphasize is to not mistake access for real power. I really determine real power as a leader that's willing to come together, get people to organize, to hold institutions, including City Hall, accountable. That's what I think real power looks like, and that's the type of mayor that I'm going to be. Okay.
Great. I mean, and that's actually a great segue. So, we've heard, the term, a lot of Democrats use the term, progressive quite a bit, right?
Popular term right now.
Yeah, it's a very popular term, right? And it's kind of hard to judge, and it's kind of been somewhat kind of co-opted, right? So what does being a progressive mean to you?
So being a progressive to me means that you're willing to fight, that you're willing to push, that you're willing to challenge the status quo, and as a leader, you're comfortable being uncomfortable and sometimes making others uncomfortable. Because the truth is, the status quo is hard to change. People will justify it, argue for it, and as a progressive, I see being a progressive as a person that's forward-thinking, that's willing to challenge things as they are. And so it's often somebody that is outside the box, not within the system, but is willing to challenge it for the improvement of other people's lives. That's what I see as a progressive.
So, I'm assuming, but I'll ask anyway, based on kind of your own self-introduction, that you kind of consider yourself a progressive.
Very much so.
Okay.
And I think I'll have the demonstrated evidence to show that, too.
Yeah.
Right. In my past, from what I've done at the University of Cincinnati, pushing for more access and opportunities for students. Before the UC Scholars Academy, a program I started, the valedictorian of Hughes High School couldn't get into the UC's Clifton campus. You just think about that for a minute. That's a systemic failure on a lot of people's behalf. So now we have this pathway program that's permanently funded for students to stay with us over the summer, and where they're empowered, they're pushed to be exposed to new opportunities. And I'm proud of the work that we did there to prepare our kids for the future. Now more and more of those kids are coming onto our campus and are prepared for a future. I want to take those type of efforts and scale it up. It's also it also lines up with what I've done earlier in my career as a volunteer. So founding the NAACP, working as a community organizer. Many of you know during the disturbances and the riots, it was a really tough time for race relations during our city. But I was on the ground pushing for reform as a student. And then on the other side of that, when I led the University of Cincinnati with the tragic killing of Samuel DuBose, I had to push for reform, and we did it successfully at that effort. So I've seen it from many sides. I've pushed as a volunteer, as a community organizer, and I've pushed when I've led the institution at the highest levels.
Okay. So because we've been talking about, progressive could mean a lot of different things, and it has a lot of different definitions. I mean, if you had to name, 3 beliefs, and you don't have to keep it to 3, I'm not trying to box you in or something, but if you just had to name some beliefs that define progressive to you.
Define progressive to me, okay.
What would that be?
Well, just get it out, I'm pro-choice. but I think it's much broader than that. It's also about it's making sure that we have an equitable tax system. It's about making sure we hold individuals who make the most accountable to everyone, and that we have an economy that's not about the few but for the many. So it's economic. It's the ability for people to have real freedom, and I define freedom as your ability to prosper, your ability to rise, your ability the ability for a woman to make her own decisions without the government intervening. Those are really important principles for me.
Great. No, I think that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think you talked about it a little bit in your kind of introduction to yourself, but I'm gonna ask again, just in case some people join late or something like that. I want to make sure that we hit this because I think it is an important thing for people to know who may or may not vote for you. Right? Is what are your top 3 focal issues? And I remember you mentioned them, but let's hit those again.
So the 3 areas of focus. First of all, the city I see is one that provides access and opportunity for all, regardless of their race, zip code, or their circumstances. And to do that, we have to focus on 3 areas. One, expanding access to education. And what that means in that area is I would focus on 2 different areas. One, expanding university partnerships and employer partnerships to provide opportunities for our kids and families for the jobs of the future. And it's not just those kids that want to go to college. It's important, too, that we, of course, have access to the latest technology, 3D printing, all that stuff. Some of that I had a lot of experience with at the University of Cincinnati and investing in programs like that. I led an innovation hub called 1819 that's now going to come online in the next year. And that's going to be a central point for the community to have access to resources, to professors, to entrepreneurs of 3D printing, but also students to start their own entrepreneurship and businesses. Beyond that, though, it's about making sure our kids have access to that, too, and that they can be prepared, particularly kids that don't normally have that support system. That's why I started the UC Scholars Academy to give pathways for students. Also, I want to invest in, we want to make sure we have access to Wi-Fi and high-speed broadband. Why is that important, particularly for underserved communities? There's a real digital divide, and if you don't have access to the internet, if you don't have access to the information, you are going to be behind. So I see that as a possibility and a necessity, and we're going to implement that. And if we can spend $500 million to develop downtown, we can certainly make sure we have that all of our kids and families have access to Wi-Fi and high-speed broadband. 2, we want to make sure we have a comprehensive transportation plan. I'm tired of majoring in minor arguments. Every conversation is about the streetcar. We need to make sure we connect all of our neighborhoods with the all of the above approach. And I believe our county and city is ready for that. We need leadership that's willing to go forward, fight for it, engage with the community. In my first term, we're going to implement that. And as soon as I get elected, I'm going to go back out to really start a campaign to make sure we implement a comprehensive transportation reform to connect the 75,000 jobs that are inaccessible to so many in our community. Finally, we're going to focus on inclusionary growth. Anybody that talks about housing, that doesn't talk about housing but talks about addressing poverty is not being serious. I want to say both of the incumbents are against inclusionary zoning. I'm the only one who is for this. And what this means is we're going to hold developers accountable to make sure that the growth that we have in our city is inclusive. So affordable housing will be integrated into development, and it will be a part of communities. So as communities like Over the Rhine and others are growing, low to moderate income people can participate and live in the community and not just be pushed out. That's what I'm willing to fight for. That's what I think what a real progressive agenda is.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so describe a project or a program that you personally championed that you kind of consider a success.
Well, the UC Scholars Academy is one of my biggest successes.
Tell us a little bit more about them.
So the UC Scholars Academy was founded out of my passion for education. From about the 2nd to the 8th grade, I was in learning disability classes, and my teachers and counselors all said I wasn't going to go to college. Luckily, I had strong parents that fought back and didn't allow me to accept it as a limitation. Nothing
like parents pushing.
Nothing like parents. So our mother said, they don't get to define you by their narrow expectations. You define yourself for yourself, by yourself.
That's great.
So because of that support, that's why I'm here today. But there's a lot of kids that don't have, that have parents, and they may be good parents, but they don't have the ability to fight back against the guidance counselors and the teachers that tell them that they can't do it. They assume that that's the advice that they should take, or they don't know how to. So it's important that we give our kids that support, and we empower those kids that have the potential and drive but lack the opportunity and access. That's the whole foundation of the UC Scholars Academy. So it's a residential bridge experience for kids that were mostly at Hughes High School. Now we're taking some other area high schools too in Cincinnati Public School District and giving them the exposure. They're pushed harder than they've ever been pushed. They work with, they start their own projects, they work in internships. And one of my proudest moments was when one of the young ladies in the program said the UC Scholars Academy made her realize she has power and that she can be empowered. It was one of my proudest accomplishments. So I was happy to see that it's permanently funded now. And as mayor, I would work to see that scaled up, to figure out more opportunities to fund it and get more grants and partnerships. And that would certainly be a focal point, getting more programs like that. Because if we don't provide more opportunities for our kids, we will not be competitive.
Good, great. So, we talked about something that you're incredibly proud of, and I could feel it, right? I could tell that you were definitely invested in this. And so I'm going to ask you something that's kind of on the flip side, right? Yeah. Maybe something that or perhaps didn't quite go as you planned it to go, and kind of what you learned and maybe what you'd do different.
So I think going back to UC, I would have liked to see more diversity, and I would have liked to see more, even more students of color get into the university. We're at, particularly for African Americans, it's about 8%. Though we've had the highest retention and rates and graduation rates during my tenure, we've had less students of color come into the university. So, though it was part of the reason why we started the UC Scholars Academy,
right.
I would also like to see us do more to help in that area, because that's been the challenge. I would also look towards how do we better work with Cincinnati State and some of our community colleges. I started some progress, and they just announced a huge partnership between the two. I started that. I would have liked that to gone a little faster, but I had to learn the bureaucracy of how to actually get it accomplished. So I'm proud of where it's starting to go, but it's not where it needs to be yet.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you would have done differently?
I'm
just wondering now that you're talking about it.
It's kind of hard to know. I know better how to do it now. I don't believe in regrets, only lessons. So.
Well, that's I guess what I'm asking,
yes,
right?
I would have pushed even harder than I did.
Yeah.
And I probably would have just pushed harder and worked more with the colleges to really challenge how they do things. The problem is it takes you a while to understand. It took me a while to really understand how they maneuvered.
Yeah.
But once I figured that out, we were able to get together.
Yeah, I can imagine, any large company or business or anything, just like in campus, right? The politics and how you kind of maneuver through the bureaucracy would definitely be interested. So I'm going to switch kind of goals, switch kind of directions here. I'm going to ask you some stuff around what do you think differentiates you, right? What's the number one quality or goal that you have in your agenda that differentiates you from the other candidates that are running for mayor?
Well, it's a great question. What really differentiates me is that I actually have a vision and policies that I'm willing to fight for. The others, I think, are largely relying on incumbency and name recognition to take them through, and not necessarily the power of their ideas, because when you question them, there's not really much difference in terms of what they've actually done between the two, including the incumbent council member who's voted 98% of the time with the mayor. So it's hard to say that you're going to be a change agent if you haven't shown the policies to do that. What I've done my entire career as a volunteer, without any salary, is that I focused on change. And I didn't do it because I was running for office. I did it because this is who I am. And I will still be that person. So people can take it to the bank that I'm not doing this because I need the job or I think I'm entitled because it's my next step. I'm doing this because Cincinnati really needs progressive leadership. And I don't think I have to check any of the establishment boxes or have to have been on city council, because I think leadership is measured by your judgment, your vision, and your ability to bring people together and get things accomplished. And if that's the measure, then I'm the most qualified and the most uniquely positioned to take our city in a progressive direction.
Okay, so let's say you win. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be several things. One, that we built a comprehensive transportation system that connected people to jobs and really made us more competitive as a region. I also want to see us, in 10 years, I have a goal to make sure that 20,000 more kids that are underserved move into either high-tech jobs or advanced manufacturing. So I want my legacy to be that during my term, we connected people to more opportunities in transportation, and we gave them more opportunities for jobs. And during my term, that was the turning point to make the city of Cincinnati one of the most inclusive and innovative cities in the world. That's my goal.
Great. So for those of you who have maybe just joined, I'm Melissa Chambliss. I'm here today with Rob Richardson, who's running for mayor for the city of Cincinnati. We're welcoming any Facebook Live questions that you may have. So if you want to ask a question, I just encourage you to click on the video and actually go into the feed for the video and ask your question there. And I think we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've gone through kind of like the introductory kind of questions, and I'm going to talk about really a topic of conversation that has been discussed quite a bit. I know we've seen quite a bit of discussion with the interviews that we've done for people who are running for city council in Cincinnati, and it's about food deserts. Yes. So lots of discussion around that. What can the city do to address this?
So the city can do several things. One, so I guess Kroger's is a $12 billion company? I think that's about right. So and we give lots of tax breaks and lots of tax credits to lots of these companies, which I'm not against, but if you do that, it should be tied to something. And the measure shouldn't just be because we're happy they're here. Yes, we're happy they're here, but we also want to do everything possible to ensure that they're being good corporate citizens. So I would challenge how we do tax credits too, and look at opportunities to leverage that to say, can we do more to prevent food deserts? We know that Kroger's just moved out of Walnut Hills, and I think that's tragic and shouldn't be accepted. Beyond that, if we can't get that, I believe in cooperative markets. I'm an investor in the cooperative market here in Clifton, and that works, and I would invest in cooperative markets as the mayor. It's a little easier to do here because there are enough people with high income to support the cooperative model. So we have to be creative about how we do it in other communities, but I would be very supportive of doing that. Third, we need to look at innovative ways to approach this. So I believe in urban gardens, and there are communities that have affordable housing. And I have an understanding that a lot of the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority does not allow you to do gardens in these areas. It's my understanding. We have to look at that policy and begin to challenge that, because urban gardens are another way to address the food desert issue. I would also look to innovation. So, we have a Research One institution here at the University of Cincinnati. I believe in challenging and putting out the best ideas, and maybe having a hackathon where we would work with students, work with innovators to fund the best ideas. There are a lot of people with creative ideas and talent. If you have leadership that wants to get the best ideas, I think we can find a way to solve this.
Yeah, and that was one of the follow-up questions I had. Is there any incentive for private citizens to become involved and to help out with these food deserts?
Right, well, that would be like I would do an incentive, something like that, a competition. So
instead of like a food truck selling tacos, go around and sell some lettuce.
Well, or just say so. An innovation program I led at the University of Cincinnati was called the Next Lives Here Innovation Competition.
Right.
We had about 1,000 people show up, and we did one for business side to come up with the best business concepts, where UC would fund some of the most innovative and entrepreneurial ideas that students had for the business side.
For just in business in general.
We had a social impact side.
Okay.
So I would keep that going, and then one of the areas we can do is, okay, let's focus on, let's say it's food desert this year. We would look for the best idea, help fund that, and start that, and work with. So I'll work with People's Liberty. I would work with People's Liberty. I would leverage UC's resources, and I would leverage the cities. You've had leadership at City Hall across the board that hasn't been visionary or innovative. They use the word but don't know how to actually apply it.
Okay. All right. Great. As a reminder, feel free to ask any questions that you have. We're going to continue on with our kind of questions that we gained from our audience prior. So we're going to kind of transition now to public transportation. And you need some water?
Allergy medicine.
So have you ever ridden the Metro?
Yes. A long time ago, when I was a student.
We can take a break, let you swallow your allergy meds.
Thank you.
So there's tons of pollen.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
The answer is yes, and the system is, as I mentioned.
How often do you ride?
Oh no, I haven't ridden for a while but I rode when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I can tell you it's not a good system. It takes 3 times as long to get to routes as it needs to. And then we know from the data that there's 75,000 jobs that are inaccessible. As I've made very clear, one of my first priorities in my first term is to pass a comprehensive transportation plan that takes the above all approach. We want to look at rail. We want to look at leveraging all the assets we have here. I propose an updated version of Metro Moves, which failed 15 years ago. But
what was Metro Moves? I'm not familiar with that.
So Metro Move incorporated rail. It eventually incorporated bringing back our subway system. We're the only city in America that actually has subway tunnels that we've never used. And just abandoned it, right? I don't believe we should do that. Right now we have the ability to go from downtown to north side uninterrupted through there. And we could either use a bus system or rail to go through there. And I don't know why we wouldn't try to leverage that as a city. It would make us more competitive, and it's an asset that can be used and leveraged. Because we can get more money from using that if we actually use it. But before we do that, of course, we have to get our fiscal house in order. But you have to have aspirations, and I will fight for that. And I fundamentally believe it's possible. It's a city. It would require us to have a countywide assessment to do that, but I think it's very doable. It failed 15 years ago for several reasons. It was right after 9/11. It was right after the disturbances and riots. There was no political leadership, and that's a key point. There hasn't been any political leadership by either incumbent on this. Nobody has laid out a plan or vision because everybody wants to be safe, and you have leaders that aren't willing to go outside the status quo, that talk about being progressive but aren't willing to push. That's why we're in the state that we're in. So when I become mayor, hopefully, humbly with your vote, I'm going to sit down with many stakeholders, the business community and others. And when you talk to the business community, it won't be adversarial, but it also won't be, what is it, everything that you want? That's not going to be my approach. My approach is going to be, how can we be the most innovative and inclusive city possible? And if we agree that's the vision, which I believe there will be plenty of businesses that agree on that, how do we get there together? And I firmly believe that they will want to help invest in this vision, and we can move forward and get it on the ballot and get it accomplished.
Great. Well, you've answered question 1, 2, and 3 on that one, so I think we're making good progress. So this is just a little bit of a repeat, but it did come in on live, so I thought we would go ahead and ask it again, and maybe you can give it a little different twist or so if you want to. If you wish you could have done something different. So what do you feel are your best qualifications to be mayor of Cincinnati? I know you talked about it a little bit, but maybe not that specific.
Well, my best quality is that I'm a leader that's actually gotten things accomplished as a volunteer on a really large level. So you've talked about volunteering. Give me an example, or give me some areas then that you volunteered for. You mentioned some of them.
Well, UC is a volunteer position.
Oh, okay.
It is not paid. It's a full-time volunteer job, is what we like to say.
Yeah.
So, although I served 9 years, served as chairman of the board, and it took up being chairman of the board took up 40, 50 hours a week, and being vice chair took up 30 or 40. So, that experience alone as a volunteer, where I led a $1.2 billion budget, 17,000 employees, 45,000 students, and at the University of Cincinnati, we had record enrollment 4 years in a row. We were voted the #1 return on investment of any public university during my tenure. We established the UC health system. So I had a lot of experience leading and getting things accomplished with a very conservative board. I have to say, when I was chairman, I was the only Democrat on the board. Yet we invested in the UC Scholars Academy to improve access and opportunities for kids that were in our neighborhoods. We invested in an innovation agenda that gave more access to entrepreneurship for everyone in our neighborhood. So we did all these, and I raised scholarships for women and minorities, the largest such scholarship in engineering ever in history. So at the University of Cincinnati. So I did those things as a volunteer without a staff, without getting paid. I can do a lot more as the mayor of the city of Cincinnati. So in terms of actually my leadership and how I judge that is the ability to get things accomplished, your vision and your judgment. If that's the measure, then I'm the best qualified to lead our city at this time.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move to board appointments. One of the questions that came through is, will you change any Cincinnati board appointments with particular goals in mind?
Oh, I'll probably change a lot from this administration.
Yeah?
Yes.
Well, let's hear about it.
So it's, first of all, it will be transparent. And so it won't be based upon relationships. It will be based upon the vision I want to see for the city of Cincinnati. So it will be based upon making sure that if we have a historic preservation board, we'll actually focus on people that want to preserve our historic buildings, not just the developers who want to just tear stuff down. We will make sure people know about it. I believe that people should have, information is power. And I'll have an open exercise. Doesn't mean that I will choose every board member that people want me to choose. Mm-hmm. But I will make sure it's public. I will be transparent about it. And it will focus on my vision of making us an inclusive and innovative city all across the board. Okay.
So we have a couple more questions coming through from our Facebook Live. So I think you talked about, your beliefs as a progressive. You consider yourself a progressive, and so, someone has additional questions around, what does your platform as a progressive include points other than pro-choice advocacy? And I think you mentioned some, but obviously that's one that stood out. So maybe you could touch on a few others.
Well, so expanding education access and actually working to make sure employers employ more of our kids in their community. So the University of Cincinnati started cooperative education. I think that model needs to be extended out to kids, particularly kids that don't have access and resources. It needs to be extended a little further on, and I will be a champion of it. I think that really, really works. I also will hold developers accountable. Inclusionary zoning, I think, is a very progressive policy. It makes sure that developers are allow people to stay in the neighborhoods and not just get kicked out because they're low to moderate income. That is a progressive policy that works, because without that policy, we know what happens with gentrification. All the low to moderate income people get pushed out, and then they get moved to another place where they're excluded from opportunities, and then we create new pockets of poverty. That doesn't work. That model is what's going on right now. It's been going on for a long time in Cincinnati and across the country, and I will fight to change that. And then transportation, I have a very progressive transportation agenda, and I will fight to make sure that it happens. I'm the most specific on all those issues. The other two incumbents are, again, not willing to be that specific, because I think they actually don't want to lay out what they're for. They just want to talk about how they can fight each other.
Okay. Okay, great. No, I think that was good. Answered that. So let's see. We've got another. Let me switch over here to the. Let's see. Could you please ask Mr. Richardson whether he will support cooperative worker-owned business and community land trusts as mayor?
The answer is yes. So I believe in cooperative education. I believe in the cooperative model in general. As I said, I'm an investor in the cooperative.
You're sure.
In the cooperative Clifton model. So I'm a believer in those type of innovative approaches to expand opportunities in our economy. I believe in apprenticeship too, to make sure that folks have access to construction knowledge training, advanced manufacturing training, incentivizing and or mandating employers to do that. So we're going to spend, $3 billion on Metropolitan Sewer District upgrade. We spend lots of money on construction. Those jobs, the first priority should go to people that live in our community, and we should give training opportunities so they can actually be ready and get hired for those jobs.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think we're going to transition. We got several topics, and hopefully we're doing okay on time.
Got through a lot.
So we got quite a few more. So we got a lot of interested line when you have
That's good.
a group of almost 8,000, and we have more questions coming in from like 4 or 5 other groups. So what are your top policy prescriptions for addressing poverty in Cincinnati? You've touched on it a little bit, but let's go deep on poverty.
But I'll hit it again. So it's systemic in nature, right? So one is expanding access to educational opportunities. That's the single most important thing we can do to move people out of poverty, but it's not enough by itself. It's the reason why I support the UC Scholars Academy. I support efforts like expanding cooperative education. I support free Wi-Fi and high-speed broadband access to all. All of those things will help bridge opportunities for folks, and I will make it'll be an essential focus, and I'll make an effort to push to get all that accomplished. I think all of which is doable. Second, you have to get people to jobs. So if you don't have a car, and there's 75,000 jobs that are now inaccessible to you, you are now trapped. You are in this cycle because you have to get a car to get to the job, but you can't afford to get to the car, so you can never get the job. I mean, it's just cruel, and I think it's immoral to keep people in that situation. But that's what's been permitted for a long time by many, and there's been nobody to step forward to say we're going to fight for a plan. That's why that's so important to address poverty, to make sure people can get to the jobs. Finally, as I discussed many times, you can't talk about poverty and not talk about housing. And so that requires us to hold developers accountable and make sure we have inclusionary growth. So as communities grow, low to moderate income folks should be allowed to stay in those communities, and those developers would be required to set aside and integrate affordable housing as they go. Those 3 things integrated together, I believe, will have a systemic impact and really make a dent in lowering poverty overall. Finally, we need to connect folks that are here to jobs. So there's a lot of talk about childhood poverty, but understand that children are in poverty because their parents are in poverty. So if we can do, and I know we can, if we can implement policies like local hiring, so as we spend money on construction, we spend money on all these things and development, the people that are actually here should have the first opportunity to work on those jobs. So I believe in first priority hiring for local residents, and mandating or incentivizing our employers to give apprenticeship and training opportunities so folks can work on those jobs. Doing all those together is what will really move the ball forward. That's hard, but it's very doable.
Well, and that's a lot. I mean, if you had to think about like specific budget items or specific, policies today that you would change, any that come to mind, or just?
Oh, there are plenty. One, how we do tax credits and how we give away developments and incentives, we need to remodel completely, just completely. So let's take development. Every development that is done in this city is paid by all of us, you and I, the taxpayers. And I wouldn't necessarily be against that, but they would have to do the other things that I'm discussing. It have to be inclusionary zoning. We'd have to work on local hiring. Because if we're going to pay for these things, we got to make sure the local residents get every opportunity to prosper from it. So that would be the first place I would look at.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of opportunities to leverage that differently.
So the median income in Cincinnati, right, is above the state average, but the poverty rate is twice the state average. How would you enhance or improve efforts towards training or retraining?
Oh, well, so I would do an apprenticeship model.
Yeah.
As I said, mandate.
And give incentives for employers to do that.
And you can give incentives. You can also make it a requirement. I mean,
for those tax credits.
So let's back up. So if you have we do a lot of construction and development, and we pay for them. So we repave our roads. We're upgrading our metropolitan sewer district. That's a $3 billion project. My hope is doing that. We'll say, okay, what are we doing to make sure we're mandating that all the employers that are working on this have to give apprenticeship,
have to give training to some set of our people that live here locally. I've actually had experience doing that, so I implemented local hire responsible bidder here. The current mayor opposed it, and some contractors are suing and fighting over it. But I think policies like that are necessary for the exact reasons you said, because that's the only way to really get at the poverty rate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we've got a couple of other questions here on Facebook Live, and then we'll continue to roll. So can you talk about your views on immigration and refugees, and what would you do differently in Cincinnati if you became mayor?
Well, I believe in immigration. Immigration is, you can't have innovation without inclusion, because you never know where the best ideas come from. Immigrants start the most businesses. Why would we not want to accept and be accepting of immigrants? It doesn't make economic sense, and of course, I don't think it's morally right to simply send people back as quickly as we can, especially people that are no threat to us and are just here to figure out better ways to support their family. So I'm extremely pro-immigration. In terms of what I would do everything possible to make us an immigrant-friendly city. I believe in the status of where we are as a sanctuary city, but that didn't really do anything to change things, right? Mm-hmm. That was really symbolic in nature, because we don't have a jail, we don't have and none of the reasons for doing that really exist in our city. So it wasn't done, I don't think, because we were actually doing something. It was done. It was politically motivated, but what we can do is you just have to be a mayor that's accessible and willing to meet with everybody and listen to them. So I've had experience with this as a leader, as a student body president. 9/11 happened, and we were at a similar state with how we are with this fear of Islam and bigotry towards Islam. And so I worked with the Islamic Student Organization then, and we worked together to educate people about not having negative stereotypes against the Muslim community, and that we ought to be working together. So I've had a lot of experience in doing that, and I will continue that as mayor.
Okay, great. So I know we've talked about public transportation. I know you mentioned accessibility to public transportation, improving public transportation. But we have a question from the Facebook Live. What are your feelings on the streetcar?
So I think in terms of the next phase,
I think just in general.
So look,
because there's a lot of.
Well, I tell people,
should we do it? Should we not? I mean,
I think we've done it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to tell people, we got to move past this. So now the next phase is, how do we have a comprehensive transportation plan? And the streetcar is going to be a part of it. We have one. So what are we not going to we're just going to pretend like we don't have it? This is a distraction by some to have a wedge issue. We've had 3 elections on this issue. It's time for us to move forward with a comprehensive transportation plan that connects people to the jobs that they need. My first focus is not going to be on extending the streetcar. It's going to be on a comprehensive plan that includes rail and the bus system, and all of the above approach. I think that has to be our next mission. It can't just be a conversation about the street.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Do you plan to build community police relations?
You have to continually build police-community relations. If you don't, we're always one step from a disaster if we don't. We have been fortunate to learn from such a tragic event, and I've been on both sides of this. So as I spoke about earlier, as a student, I founded the first college chapter of the NAACP, and nearly all of my 3.5 years was focused on making sure the city was stopping racial profiling. I've been racially profiled quite a few times, and it's a demoralizing feeling when you know that you're being targeted simply because of what you look like.
Right.
And that happened to me a lot as a teenager, so I personally understand what it means. But as a student, I fought and I worked and I pushed city council to make sure racial profiling stopped, and I was involved in the collaborative agreement to implement a lot of the reform that you see today. On the other side of it, as chairman of the board, when one of our former officers shot and killed Sammy DuBose, I said very clearly that you see wouldn't be defined by this moment, but we would be transformed. So as the chairman of the board, and we had an interim president during that time, and so I had 3 presidents during my whole term, during my term as chairman. So you essentially have to be the president or work very closely with the president too. But I pushed and we pushed to make sure we remove the police chief, the assistant. We restructured the entire police force. We engaged and started a community council, and then we hired an independent monitor to make sure that we were continuously updating and really meeting the reform, so we can be a community-oriented policing system. And we did that voluntarily. We weren't like the city. The city was sued and had to do it. And that the fact that we did it voluntarily is very important in this current environment. Currently, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, is now pushing back against police reform, and he's pulling back consent decrees where police departments would have to work to make sure that they were not abusing people, not engaging in racial profiling. He's not only not doing it, he's pulling back those agreements. So I've led on both sides of that, and of course I will continue that as the next mayor.
All right. Well, thank you. So we're right at almost an hour, so time flies.
It does.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions though. So we're going to wrap, but I'm going to give you like a few minutes just to kind of wrap up, you know, what you'd like to end with and what you'd like to say to everyone. Okay?
Thank you. Well, you know, I don't check all the boxes of being an elected official or meeting the establishments. I have the least amount of endorsements, but I do have what I think is the most important thing. I have a vision and I have leadership experience that I believe can move us forward with a real progressive agenda. I'm not afraid to say what my agenda is. I don't give vague answers. I don't change when I'm in certain rooms. I am who I am, and I'm going to continue to be that person. A real progressive is one who's willing to fight, who's willing to make people uncomfortable when they need to be, and push back against the status quo. I've done that my entire career. I did it as a student. I did it as a volunteer at the University of Cincinnati, and I will do it as your next mayor. Never mistake access for real power. The fact that you might have a council member that's nice, that will invite you to events, is not enough. Real power is the ability to organize, bring people together, and hold institutions accountable. I will do that as your next mayor and really fight for systemic change. While there are three people in this race, there's really only 2 choices. You have a choice between the status quo, what you've seen out of City Hall for the last 18 years. My 2 opponents, they are incumbents, and they've been in office together nearly 18 years. And you can ask yourself one simple question: what progressive change have they brought you? If you can't think of what that is, you should ask, why should you vote for them? I will bring new progressive leadership, and I'm willing to do that with you. We are 52 neighborhoods, but we are one Cincinnati, one people, one community. And on May 2nd, I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Great. That was great, Rob. I appreciate you joining us. Yeah, it was really nice to meet you and spend some time with you. So for everyone, if you missed out, please feel free to watch the video. If there are any additional questions that come through, we'll get them to your campaign manager just so that you have an opportunity to address those, okay?
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.